Welcome everybody to another Internal Aptora training webinar. I appreciate everybody being here. Today we are going to talk about budgets. Now when I Google budgets, which I did, a lot of results came up. Why does a small business need a budget? And most of us probably know why we need a budget. A budget is a plan. So it's always helpful to have a plan, right? You want to have a plan. Nobody wins by accident, right? So you don't go to the Super Bowl by accident. You have a plan to get to the Super Bowl. Same way with a budget. A budget is your plan. How much you plan to sell, how much you plan to pay for equipment, how much do you plan to spend on labor, etc. You put that into a budget. And a budget is typically part of an overall business plan, because you might have a business plan that says we're going to hire people, we're going to buy a building, we're going to replace equipment, and then you go to your budget and figure out how to pay for all that. So a budget is really important. And what is a budget? A budget really is just a income statement that you've made up. You go into some program like Excel or Total Office Manager and you create a budget, you're really just creating an income statement. It's just a fake one. It's what you think is going to happen. It might be what you hope is going to happen, and it might be what you think is going to happen. And those two may not be the same thing. In Total Office Manager, to access the budget report, we would click Reports, Financials, go down to Budget. And we would find our budget and preview it. And you'll notice it looks pretty familiar. You're thinking, well, that looks just like an income statement. And that's all it is. It's an income statement that you've made up. It draws from your chart of accounts, your normal chart of accounts, like gas and oil, bad debt, freight, postage, etc. So it looks at the chart of accounts just like an income statement does, but the information isn't coming from the general ledger. It's coming from a budget table. Now, where it's most useful, really, is when you use it to compare what you thought was going to happen with what really happened. So let's take a look at that. We'll go to an income statement. And let's go to a year that I have some information. Notice how we have a feature here that says compared to budget, if available. And we'll just click that one and preview. Now, normally we would pick a budget that represented the year we're examining. I went back several years because I knew I had some data there. And we would pick a budget that was our prediction of what would happen for that entire year, or it could be for a month. It could be month to date. And what it'll do is it'll show you your normal income statement in one column and your budgetary income statement in the other. And if you wish, it'll show the difference. And the difference can be represented as a dollar amount or a percent, either one. You can also have budgets for departments. So we could print an income statement for our commercial division, demand service department. And if we had one, we could go find a budget for demand service under that division. And that would allow us to see how we're doing per department or for the whole company. That's really where it's useful, is when you include it in your income statement and you compare those two to see how you're doing. Now, remember, this is extra credit, but remember, if things don't look good, you're probably going to have to make adjustments to your company. You're certainly going to want to make adjustments to your budget. So you may find that your sales are running short. They're falling short of what you had hoped or anticipated. They might be doing better. You may be spending more or less on labor. You might find out that you have to buy a new vehicle, and you're going to have to account for the interest expense. And you might have to account for equipping that vehicle. So to do that, you would go to your budget and you would modify your budget. Remember, your budget is subject to being updated all year long. Almost like an estimate. We've talked about creating an estimate for a job, and then we do the job and we compare the estimate to the actual results of the job. That's kind of what we're talking about here. But what's really important is we don't change an estimate once we create it, because we want to know what you thought was going to happen. When it comes to a budget, you do modify it. You could make a copy of it if you wanted to, but you do modify the budget as more information becomes available to management. All right, enough about that, right? Let's get into a budget. That's what we're here for. Let's clear some space. You'll find the budget feature under Company at the Budget List menu option. Now, I don't mind saying, even though we're recording this, and even though the whole world could hear it, I don't mind saying that the budget feature has not evolved a lot over the years. Everything else in Total Office Manager has evolved significantly. One of the things that hasn't changed much is the budget feature. And that could be because it's fine. It does what it's supposed to do, and people are happy with it. And another reason could be people aren't using it. And that's probably what's going on. I don't think enough people use the budget feature. We don't get a lot of feedback. We don't have a lot of complaints. We don't have a lot of feature requests, or none. And I think it's because people aren't using the budget. And that's too bad, because it's really an important part of running your company. Here we have a normal list that you're used to seeing in Total Office Manager. We can see active budgets, inactive, show all, recently viewed, collapse that if you want to, just like any other menu. If you had a lot of them, you could search, filter. There is a quick report that allows you to quickly see the budget, but that report really is for auditing purposes. While you're building it, do a quick print. Have a look at it. And under here, we have a few more options. So let's get into some of the menu options. If I right-click on a budget, I can edit, delete, edit properties. I can make it inactive. I can open it in Excel, not the budget, the list, this list in this form. Let's go to edit properties first. This has been updated recently. We did do some updates recently to the budget, and it was mainly because I needed changes for things that I've been doing. Under properties, we can change the name. We can also assign this budget to a department. So we can assign it to a department. And if we do that, we probably need to give it a name that tells us what department it's for. This just simply says new budget. And really, a better name would be something like company budget. So you know it's for the whole company. Company budget for 2019. You could make it for a particular department, though, if you wanted to. So I'm going to close that. We're going to create a new one, new budget. First thing we do is give it a name, and I'll call it company budget for 2016. I'm going to go back in time. This is important. Specify the year built for. Total Office Manager doesn't really know what to do with that number. To you and me, that makes perfect sense. It's 2016, but it's software. It's just a computer. It doesn't know. So we have to tell it, what year is this for? And that's what this selector does. You can use the arrows or type it in. And then you have the option of building the budget from a particular year, because you probably don't want to start from scratch. So what this will do is it will take your income statement from, in this case, 2016, and it will use that to build your budget. And maybe you want to use a different year. That's fine. Maybe you think this year is going to be a lot like 3 years ago. Pick one from 3 years ago. But in most cases, you want to pick something because you don't want to start from scratch. Now, again, as we mentioned earlier, you could be building a budget for just one department. And if that's the case, pick it. Now, if you're creating a budget for a department, remember, you're going to have to do all of these. And I know that's a lot of work, but in many cases, it's worth it because you're hopefully running a company that's very departmentalized. Each of these departments has different requirements, different demands, different overhead factors. So it is important to do a budget per department. It will take time, that's for sure. There isn't any way to build one budget and then parse it out by department. That would be difficult for us to do. There just isn't a way to do that. So I'm going to build a company budget. Depending on how much data you have, it could take 3, 4, 5 times that amount of time. But it should build pretty quickly. And what it did here is it built out a budget based on the year that I picked. And you can see up here it indicates that. Company budget for 2016. Details for year 2016 built from the year 2016. So that gives us an idea of how we got here. Under reports, print list, print, that is just a quick print or print preview for auditing purposes. That way you can get a quick look at what you have so far. Remember, you're probably going to be using it under reports, financial statement, but that's just to get a quick look. It doesn't allow you print options. You have a filter tool here so that you can filter out what you may or may not want to see. For example, if you want to focus on income, get rid of Cogs, get rid of expenses, get rid of other income. Maybe you want to hide zero amounts. I'll bring those back. Now what you can do is start filling in these cells like you would in Excel. So what we'll do is we see we have annual total right there. Maybe I'm expecting subcontractors' income from subcontractors to be, say, $15,500. Now, what I could do is get this calculator going and divide 15,500 out, or maybe type in a number directly. If it's useful, you can put your cursor in the annual total and right-click, and you can click Adjust Month Amounts. And what it will do is it will automatically divide out that number evenly for each month. And you can then change each one of those if you prefer. Another thing you could do is type in an amount, say in February of 5,000, click, see what happens when you click adjust month amounts now. So what it did is it added the $5,000 to your annual total and then divided them all out. Another option you have is adjustments. And depending on where you're at when you open this form, you could have up to 4 options, like add or subtract the percentage to all selected, add, subtract fixed amount to all selected, or set all selected to a specific amount, or divide like we've seen before. So what you can do is you can select individual cells and then different options will be presented to you depending on your selection. Let's right click, take a look. Clear budget, be careful with that one. That would clear the entire budget. Or you could simply clear a line and start over. Or clear a selection, like you have your cursor here. You can export this into a file format for, say, Excel. Now, you're not going to be able to easily re-import this if you put it into Excel, but you do have that ability, and that may be helpful for planning purposes. You might want to export this to Excel to help you plan out your budget. Now, as you're working in your budget, you know how I feel about save. Save often. Whenever you do something to your budget and you're happy with it, be sure to save it. And then that way, if you mess it up really bad, you could go ahead and hit the red X and it'll say, do you want to save your changes? And you'd say no. So save as you go. As long as you like what you're doing, save as you go. Now, once you take care of income, you might want to take care of COGS. Maybe you want to see the income while you're doing COGS, maybe not. But it might be time to take care of your costs of goods sold. Now, of course, you might have seen it when I scrolled over here earlier. You can see the account number here, and that is the account number of your chart of accounts. Now, whenever I go in here, I always want to rearrange it. I always want to rearrange that account number, but you're not able to. These are not arrangeable because they're in, of course, order of month. You also have the ability to edit the chart of account. Either double click on it or use the menu. That way, if you discover something about the account that is not correct or you want to change, then you can open up the chart of account here and mess around with it. You also have the ability to hide the account type if you wanted to. Probably the next thing you would do is go on to expenses. And again, fill out each field or put in your total amount, divide that out, and then modify each cell. That's what most people do. Under the menu, you have the same options as if you right-clicked here. And it's the same here. We just give you multiple places to deal with the data. So once you get the budget looking the way that you think it ought to look, it's time to give it a try. You can come up here to print list, or what you might want to do is hit save. Don't close it yet, hit save. Come up here to reports and either look at the income statement or look at the budget. Company budget, that's the one we created. And now you can look it over. You also could split it out by month so you get a better idea of how it looks on a monthly basis. And you can see we have a lot of work to do. Most of those months didn't have much information. So again, typically what we do is we build a budget based on a prior year, and we pick the year that we think we're going to look like the most. And it could be for the entire company or pick a budget for a department and then go from there. Add and subtract as needed. Also, I didn't point out, but it works just like you've seen elsewhere in the program, the ability to sort, which could help. Typically, your account numbers are in the order that you would want to sort by. So generally, you don't sort by sorry, I misspoke, not account ID. Well, I said the right thing. I pointed at the wrong thing. Okay, so I pointed at account ID. What I meant to point at was account number. That's your chart of account number. In this database, they are not in good order. But typically, you would sort by account number, and that would put these in the proper order that they would appear on your income statement. Are there any questions so far on what we've seen? Okay. All right. So I'm going to hit save and close for now, and we'll come back to the list. One thing that's real important is that you cannot have two or more budgets for the same department the same year. Here we created a company budget for the year 2016, and we know it's for 2016 because it says built for year. We cannot make another one for that same year. And we can't have two or more for the same department either. The software now prevents you from doing that. It'll pop up a message that says, hey, you've got a duplicate. You need to inactivate the other one. But in prior versions, it was possible to create a duplicate budget. So be aware that if you have a duplicate budget, the software will total those up together. So in other words, if we had two company budgets for the year 2016 and both of them were active, if both of them were active, the software is going to treat both of those as one budget, and it's going to total them up. It's an easy fix. Just inactivate the budget. Find the duplicate, open it, do this, save and close. Or you can always right-click to activate or inactivate. But just be sure you don't have any duplicates. Now, there is a very good help topic that was recently updated. If you go to support.aptora.com, type in the word budget or creating budget, just make sure the word budget gets in there. You'll see that we have a help topic. It talks about creating new, editing existing. It explains what every menu option, every control, every button means. It talks about the various reports. There is a hyperlink to a topic on the reports. And then you might remember when I right-clicked, there were options, budget adjustments. There's a help topic just for that. It explains those options and what they do. So a good help topic on that. Once you have the budget done, you're pretty well finished. Again, where it's used is in reports. There's the budget report. You typically would use it to just look at your work and make sure that it looks the way you thought it would look. But on a daily basis, you would add it to your income statement and you would use it to compare what you thought was going to happen versus what happened. You'll want to make adjustments on an ongoing basis. So if you have a very disappointing month, you might want to go into your budget and change the budget to reflect the disappointing month. Now, you might say to yourself, why would I do that? Because then I don't know what I originally budgeted. You could make a copy of the budget or keep a printed copy of the original, but the budget isn't like the job estimate versus actual. Might remember that. We come to jobs, and we all know one of my favorite reports is job estimate versus actual. What did you think was going to happen versus what happened? And the rule is once you make an estimate and it's agreed on, you can't change the estimate because we want to know what you estimated versus what actually happened. That could be useful when it comes to a budget. But remember, the budget, one of the most valuable things about the budget is that if you update it on an ongoing basis, it'll help tell you where you're going and what you need to do to get where you want to be. So if you have a truck breakdown, you should adjust your budget. If you have a disappointing month or you have a fantastic month, or you lose employees or you hire employees, or you give people a raise, you need to go into the budget and modify the budget to reflect the raise. Because that way the budget is constantly predicting how the year will end. That's the key here. Unlike the estimate versus actual, we want to keep the budget updated so that we constantly have as good a prediction as possible as to how the year is going to end. All right, one more tip I'll give you, probably obvious. Remember, the budget is driven off the chart of account list. It's important that you have a good chart of account list. There are tools to help you clean this up. If you need to merge chart of accounts, you can always pick the account that you want to drain and pick the account that you want to move that money to. And then you can inactivate the empty account. This would allow you to consolidate charts of accounts in your chart of account that were duplicated or mean essentially the same thing. You could also go in here and create new accounts and move accounts underneath it. Like, for example, you could create auto and truck expense like you see I did, and then I put related ones under that. And maybe I would do that with credit cards or insurance. And maybe we have two types of insurance. It's a good idea to go in and clean up your chart of accounts and make sure that it's in pretty good shape. You could, of course, spend a lot of time on it, and you want to get those budgets going. The next thing you want to do is make sure that you have set up a good department list here. And you can see that I have divisions and I have departments. So commercial is a division. Commercial HVAC is a division. And within that is a department. And it's easy to move that. But do spend some time getting your company departmentalized as well. And that could be phase 2. You might have not done that in the past, and you don't want to wait on your budget. So maybe that's phase 2. Create a company budget and go from there. But the next step in the budgetary evolution is full departmentalization. Now, here's a great tip for you on budgets. Use your budgets to calculate your pricing. So we all know that you should sit down with an income statement and use that income statement to calculate your labor rates, your parts markups, etc. We all know that. We've heard that. We've been to those seminars. That's not bad advice. But one thing that's even better is to use a budget, because an income statement shows you what's already happened. A budget shows you what's supposed to happen. So if you create a budget and it includes things like buying new vehicles, replacing old ones, hiring, firing, raises, promotions, demotions, new building, cheaper insurance, different health insurance, different supplier, different Cogs, percentages, etc. You get the idea. If you build a budget that reflects all the things that you think are going to change in your company, well, now you could be pricing everything today for what you think is going to be happening tomorrow, in a month from now, and 6 months from now. Hopefully you see my point on that. So using financial statements to calculate labor percentages, markups on materials, etc., that's a good idea. But what's even better is to use a budget. And now you have the most accurate, up-to-date, forward-thinking, break-even pricing calculations possible. And that's what the big shots do. Who are the big shots? So I'm grinning. The big shots with the suits and the MBAs. That's what they do. They use budgets to calculate their pricing. And they constantly modify those budgets, which could mean they are modifying their pricing. So that's all there is to creating a budget. It's easy to do. It can take time, especially if you're doing them by department, but it's not difficult. It's easy work. It can be time consuming. My recommendation, so you can get started right away, is go into your chart of accounts and do the easy work and get that straightened out. And maybe yours is good. And then go right into creating a budget for the whole company. And you can do a quarterly budget if you want to, or you can do an annual budget. It's easier typically to do an annual and then adjust your quarters. And that way you can get started right away on budgets. Are there any final questions on the topic of budgeting? All right. Doesn't appear to be. Well, that was easy. That was an easy one. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it. And I'll see you on our next Aptora training session.